So thank you all for coming. Yeah. My hope for this session is to share with you the principles and the perspective of this, what we would call this work, which I don't call it work at all. It's more just like living your life in a normal, healthy way. And that's all I'm doing. And the way that I would really love to do this together is through resonance, where we're really working with a communal resonance. In other words, this is not about a hierarchy where I'm telling you blah, 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 what you should think. My inspiration is to share with you a perspective of life and hopefully find a communal resonance together through that. So you're welcome to ask questions as well as thoroughly challenge anything that's not resonating for you in this session. And I'm also going to be working with, I'll be folding all of this into what I refer to as the gift process. And how many of you know about the gift process or have worked with that? Yeah.
Is that unique to this, or is it like gifting? The idea of gifting?
It's the perspective of it is, it's definitely gifting, but it's a process that I've laid out with this work.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's unique in that way. So what I'm going to do is just sort of lay this out, and what you're going to hear are terms that I share. The terms are words that resonate in this time for what's here, for us to understand ourselves in a deeper level. And so a term is a word or a couple of different words that are strung together that communicate something that resonates inside of you. That's all that words are for. Words are just symbols. They're symbols of symbols, really. The deeper that you go into resonance, the deeper that those words can unpack their symbols, unpack their meaning. So what we're going to start with is this model of biological intelligence. So the biological field and the biological intelligence. You're welcome to write any of this down and make notes. So the biological intelligence, the flow of life, this intelligence that is a movement which we could say is its own language, a movement that moves through all of life. And that movement is what I would refer to as love. And the reason why is because it's constantly listening to how life can move forward and extend itself again and again and again. It's an intelligence, the biological field, the biological intelligence is an intelligence. It's this one intelligence that's moving through all of life. And when you look at nature, what you'll always notice is this universal theme, which is fractaling. So you'll see the constant language of spiraling throughout all of nature. And when you look at the root systems of trees, when you look at the fractaling of the veins and structures through leaves, when you look at our neurology, you look at the veins and the tissue, the fibrotic tissue, you look at every aspect of the system as it's growing, you will see that universal theme throughout all of life, that spiraled, fractal theme. And you see it in the galaxy of the universe. You see it in how the cell shapes to become energy efficient and round. So that intelligence, as I've developed my own personal practice to go in and allow that intelligence to be my thought system, to be my mind, that intelligence has taught me my own personal meaning for what love is. It's an intelligence that preserves life and gives, constantly gives. And in the giving, what's happening is this constant involuting, this constant receiving. And so that fractaling model, that spiraled, arcing, branching reaching, rooting, spiraling, that whole thing is actually coming from an involuting, a receiving of the self, a receiving of life. So the sun is imploding and its rays are expanding from that implosion. Is this resonating? Yeah. And the heart is pulsing, and in its pulse, it's gushing more and more life through these veins. The diaphragm is pulsing. It's pulsing in on itself to activate all of the other diaphragms. That pulsing, and so it's this constant falling in on ourselves that fractaling of life continues. It's the receiving of life within ourselves. One of the beautiful symbols that we have is the Ouroboros, the snake swallowing its tail. That's a mystery school symbol that comes from the ancient Asclepi, Egyptian, all of that, those original symbols. Before we had technology, before we had, when we just had nature as the guide. Is this resonating so far? So the perspective that I'm inviting us to resonate in is the perspective of opulence, of super abundance, super opulent abundance, the plentum of super opulence, the plentum of abundance, what lives in our heart, what is constantly beaming from behind our eyes, what's swallowing us as we allow it, breath by breath. So, why it is that we don't always experience that plentum, that perfect love, the eternal, the source of life that we are, why is it that we don't always experience that ourselves within that? That's what a body of work, or that's what the mystery school was created for, to clarify that confusion. And this work that I'm sharing, which I did not develop, it came from the biological field, from the biological intelligence, and woke me up and tuned me and pulled my head out of my ass, basically, because it was really far up there. So this work is based in, the application of it is based in a movement practice. And the movement practice goes from being highly dynamic to deep internal rest. So stillness and everything in between. That's the law of nature. That same movement, no matter how big or small it is, it will always spiral us back into ourselves, into the rest point, into the eternal. So that's why I refer to it as a biological intelligence, because its movement is always taking us back into our center. So this practice it's a practice that creates a simple container for us to study that internal movement for ourselves and to nourish from the eternal being that we are. And I've always laughed because for me this was never work. This practice has never been work. And it was always just like, are you kidding me? I'm on board. This is pure pleasure. And what I've noticed is that when people have approached this work, this play, this nourishment, the plentum, they have often, gradually what I noticed was that people would come and they'd be like, resisting the nourishment or not understanding it. And that basically what I could see was happening was that the defense structure was showing up. So the ego, the thought system of separation, was which is just a thought system, it's nothing more. It'll have a projection of you as your identity and your story. It'll project, that thought system will, in its confusion, project an identity of you in separation. And so what the biological intelligence does is resolve that. And it does it through nourishment. So it does it through love. It does it through connection. And the reason why I felt inspired to share all of this with you today is so that you can have the principles of the work or the process of the practice and apply it in any place in your life. So once you understand the model that the biological intelligence is constantly offering us, the plenum, once you understand that, you can start applying it in any place. So another way of saying that is you can question the defense structure. You can go, is it based in guilt and shame? Is it based in sadness? What I'm feeling right now? Is it sadness? Is it guilt and shame? Is it fear? Can I question whether that's really me or not? Can I see that anything that's coming from separation and lack, can I separate myself out from it for a moment and just go, that could possibly be the defense structure. That identity could possibly be the defense structure. Within that questioning, there's a space for me to then receive the greater awareness of my being. There's a space for me to say, what would it feel like if this came from a deeper connection? What would it feel like? So within that question, there's a focus on nourishment. There's a focus on positive sensation. There's a focus on life, light, joy. Does this resonate?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how does the defense structure resolve? It resolves through having an experience of something greater. So how does the defense structure resolve? How do we see the illusion of fear and lack? It resolves through having an experience of something greater than fear and lack. And the reason why a practice or a school or your own internal school is necessary is to have a container where you create a space for yourself to have an experience greater than your life condition, greater than your present identity. Always. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's important to, the reason why I feel inspired to lay out the principles is because once you see what the principles are, and again, these are not my ideas, they come from the intelligence of the biological field. In other words, you can question every idea if you apply it to the biological field. You can see whether or not it's lawful, whether or not it will stand up in the biological intelligence, or will it fall apart. So that's such a beautiful way to become self-referential. You can take anything and go, will this hold up in the foundation of love? Will this hold up in the foundation of life? And go inward, close your eyes, and let your breath guide that process. Yeah, that's how you become self-referential. Do we have anything that we want to ask questions around, or anything before I go further? Is there anything to contribute?
Could I ask, when you say the mystery school, like is like what like are there like different mystery schools?
Mm.
So okay, I'm just curious, like what that is.
What the mystery school is, or what I'm
Or like
referring-
yeah, like which one, like what
Okay.
that is, yeah.
It's a really good question, thank you for asking. The mystery school, in my experience, and that's all that I'm sharing, The mystery school is the intelligence of life that knows how to unravel the defense structure. It knows how to very specifically, very personally for you, how to resolve the idea of separation and lack and fear. The mystery school does not exist in time or form. It's not defined by time or form. The mystery school will land in any culture and any time. And how it is that it's perceived at that time, how it is that whoever it is that goes inward and receives that resolution, then they will pull through their interpretation and what's relevant for them in that time. So if it was Egypt, if it was ancient China, if it was, Mayan, whatever, anywhere you turn, you can see where the mystery school has landed. So mystery as in mystical. What it is it's the focus on the mystical experience. And this means that's the key word, is experience. So what's happened, if I'm just, going off for a minute, what's happened, what you can see in each school is a place of where there's been an interpretation that it enters through a filtration system of the mind. And then it becomes that type of school. And that's fine. There's no judgment in that. What's available to us all is having our own internal school, our own internal way of seeing whether we're filtering it through our mind or dropping deeper and allowing the attunement process, the attuning to happen. And the way that you know is when you reach the truth, when you get to the end of something, there's no longer a charge. So if you're ever working with something, if you're working with a concept, or if you're working with an idea, or you're working with resolving internal conflict, you always know when you get to the end of the road because there's no charge. And what sits there is neutrality. There's peace. Yeah. And so when you're sitting in that, that's where you can feel the plenum. That's where that silent space can happen, where the gushing life, the infinite gush, can start to come forward and through you. So, is that English?
I can
It's not English, we understand.
Yeah. So that's such a beautiful principle to understand, that in the resolution of the defense structure, the outcome is neutrality. So if I was defining the term neutrality, that doesn't mean like blank. It means equal, balanced. Neutrality is balance. It's where I don't need you to understand what I'm saying. I don't need to believe in anything. I'm not wrapped up in trying to get anywhere. I'm not trying to get anything. That's what neutrality brings. That's what the internal practice, your internal practice, can bring you. Now, just to say, as we're working with this, there's two things that you may feel. You may feel like you need to sleep. And that's fine. If you need to lay down while we're working with this, let yourself sleep. What's happening is sometimes this has to go below the mind. Your mind has to get out of the way for the transmission, the tuning to happen. The other thing you may feel is just reeling. You may feel yourself being like, and so just breathe with it and feel what's there. You may feel neutrality too. So, yeah, so the mystery school, yeah, it can show up anywhere at any time. And what I found for myself was that I just needed truth. I needed to feel resolve. I needed to feel resolution inside of myself. And within that kind of questioning, I started to hear and feel an internal voice, an internal intelligence that started to give me principles. And I'll break down what I mean by that. And as it was saying that, as it was doing that, it was saying, these principles are the principles of one. This is the principles of one, that which all life shares. Yeah. So a principle, what is a principle? Anyone have that? A kind of a definition of what a principle is?
Like foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's something that reflects the foundation of who you are. It's either a reflects or it's an aspect of the foundation of what you are, of what is, of what that model, of what that thing is. So the principle of love, principle of truth. Again, if it's not a principle, then it's just an idea, it's a concept, and it's personal. It's like, yeah, I love you, I feel truth in that, you love me, I feel truth in that. But when you're working with a practice of going inside and finding neutrality, the principle of love, or the principle of truth, that principle is an intelligent medicine inside of you that is clarifying your thoughts, clarifying your body, clarifying your life, to bring you back to feeling whole, to feeling one. So this intelligent medicine is always here, and the biological intelligence, that movement, that language that moves through all life, that's the place of where everything can ground. It's the place of where it doesn't get etheric and it doesn't get, multidimensional, it doesn't get, psychic. It gets grounded in the application of time and form. Does this resonate?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you have something you wanted to share? Okay. Does anyone have anything they want to share here?
You're saying in the movement practice is where everything is around, or in the biological?
Both. So the principles, the truth of life can always ground through the biological intelligence, and that if you have a practice, which is what we've been working with, that's grounded in the biological intelligence, that intelligence shows you a model that's life-sustaining. It shows you a movement that's life-sustaining, that preserves and honors life. Yeah. So the whole idea is for things to get more and more simple, as opposed to complicated. And that's my inspiration of laying out what we're playing with, is so that things can just get really simple in that way. And the way that works is by focusing on nourishment, focusing on what feels life-sustaining. Is this resonating? Yeah. Any questions or anything?
Even the process is grounding, or it's connected to, or it is grounded?
The process, say that again?
Go ahead, do you know what I mean?
No.
The process itself of connecting to that source, is that the process that's grounded?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll say it, I think I'll just play with it a couple ways, and then we can. So if you're developing a practice for yourself, the way that the practice will serve you is it will ground your body into the earth, into the biological intelligence. And when that's happening, what you'll feel is all of those spirals and all of that movement become a coherent language that shapes you, that shapes this body in a very dynamic, fluid, beautiful, coherent way. When that happens, as the body's grounding, then the mind can ground into the eternal. So the body grounds into the earth, the mind grounds into the eternal. The love flows.
what's the eternal?
Oh, okay, I'll clarify that in a minute.
What's the kind of, right now it's,
So the eternal, that's another way of saying the source of life. It's what it is that's infinite. It's what it is that is the constant. So it is the plenum. It is what is formless and always here. Yeah, the eternal. That is who, what, and where we eternally are. That is who we are. We are eternal. We are whole and complete. That's what we are. That will never change. This will never change. This is what the biological intelligence and the mystery school, our internal knowing, is resolving, is any idea that we are not eternal. So it's resolving any ideas that we're believing from thinking as though we're limited. As we drop into that, as we drop into the eternal, we realize that we're having a human experience and that we're not defined by that human experience. That's the place of choice.
For me, I'm curious how an experience can show us that we're more than a physical experience. So I wonder what you mean by physical experience.
Okay. So let's just create a scenario so that we can work with it that way. If I'm having an experience of being separate and limited, and I'm thinking I'm just a body locked into time and form, and I'm totally identified with that, what I'm going to find is that I have a lot of thoughts that are based in fear. And I'm going to be believing in those projections. I'm going to be defining a lot of my relationships based in fear and limitation and lack. So that my experience of myself is I'm over here, you're over there, we're separate, and I want to keep it that way because I'm afraid. But I also want your approval, but I won't acknowledge that. So it's this constant confused, So how does that, to the degree that I go in that direction is to the degree that I see pathology. It's to the degree that I see more and more illness and pathology, distortion. So how would that resolve? How would that defense structure resolve? First of all, my eternal being is saying that's not true. So what I'm feeling inside of myself is an immense conflict. If it was true, I would be riding the high heaven. I would be on that wave and so enjoying the fact that I'm in fear. I would be so enjoying that because I was in the truth of life. But I'm not. I'm feeling conflicted. I'm feeling defended. I'm struggling. And I'm feeling tighter and tighter and tighter. I'm feeling the life get sucked out of me. My breath is cramping. I'm getting more and more dehydrated the older I get. So I'm becoming a contraction. Is this resonating? Okay. So how does that resolve? What if I said, you know what? I know this isn't true. Or maybe I don't know it's true, but I can feel that I want more. I want more than living my life in fear. So that choice starts to open me up to then listening to the question, how does this resolve? And I can get real busy. I can go, well, I'm going to need to fix this, and I'm going to need to fix that, and I need to do this and do that, and learn this and correct that, and all of that. But what does that do?
Build up the defense structure.
Exactly. It reinforces the defense structure. Yeah. So the simplicity of the self-remembering process, it's that first step of saying, what if this wasn't me? What if this whole identity is just a defense structure? It's not who I really am. Within that what if, then you start to go, well, what if I just started to focus on what felt good? What if I started to allow myself some self-care and started nourishing? What if I ate, in ways that felt healthy? What if I let myself sleep? What if I didn't attack or feel attacked by you or attack you? What if I just didn't play with all that and I focused on something that felt good? So that's the focusing of nourishment, focusing on nourishment. Is this resonating? Okay. So that focusing on nourishment, that opens me up to a foundation of life that is already there. The more that I focus in that direction, the more that I look around me and I see all of nature following that focus, following that intelligence. Does this resonate? Yeah. So I can look and I can see that movement of nourishment, that cycle of nourishment continuing on and on and on.
I was wondering, in this process of learning, do we experience these polarities, like eternal fear, as we're learning? Does that happen? So we all kind of go through more intensely as we're working with this more?
Until you, that's why I keep speaking to this part about separating yourself out, because that's what you're doing. It's a clarification, a clarifying, yeah. And the reason why it would feel like you're bouncing back and forth of polarities is because you've made the idea of limitation and lack and fear and separation. You've made separation, you've identified more with separation than who you eternally are. So what sits inside of this internal medicine, the biological intelligence, is it will constantly show you where that decision was made. And all that's required is just going, oh, there it is. Right? That was it. That was the moment. And within that, the gush of life starts flowing again and again, breath by breath, again and again. Until you're so full and you're gushing and you're not trying to get anything from the environment anymore, because it's all happening inside. This lovemaking is happening inside. This circular involuting of nourishment is filling you from the inside. You stop the process. You stop believing in the polarity. You allow yourself to experience that gushing. You realize you can't get it from anything else because there is nothing else. And then from there, you feel yourself starting to beam. And you feel yourself starting to overflow and give. And then all of a sudden, all you're doing after a season of change is simply giving. You're just constantly giving. But that giving isn't a giving away. It's happening from this implosion, this involution of lovemaking where your eyes are rolling so far back in your head, but yet you're still here, able to be in the giving. Does that make sense? What I was saying? Yeah. That is the biological intelligence, and that is the process of how all life that's coming from that intelligence continues on. So the forms will continue to change. The body will come and go. We know this. The process of the biological field, the biological intelligence, what it will constantly remind you is that you are not a body. You are life. So bio means life. Life intelligence. And our defense structure is identified with form, as though form is life. But what the biological intelligence does within its movement is take you back to the place of where life begins. And that's the eternal. That's the place of rest. So the awakening process is a gentle a gentle rest, and a peaceful awakening. So that's again why I keep focusing on the neutrality being the guide, and the nourishment being the guide. Is this resonating? Yeah. So the thing that's inspiring for me in sharing this perspective is resonance, is that we get to each acknowledge that the source of life is right here, is you, and that there's no authority figure outside of you. There's no authority figure outside of you. There's nothing that's going to tell you who you are, except for me. That was a joke. Because what am I saying? I'm saying it's all inside of you. Yeah, so there's no guru, there's no nothing. And what we always have is this biological intelligence that's living inside of us, that's who we are, that is guiding us. Do we have any questions or anything we're working with there?
I have a question I asked you the other day that you said you're bringing this talk.
Okay.
You were saying something high, and you said the phrase something like the defense structure was created before space and time and form.
Yeah.
And I repeated that back to you when you were talking a bit more.
Yeah. So one of the beliefs about the defense structure is that it's created through your story. So-and-so dropped me when I was 1 month old. I wasn't held, I wasn't loved. That's when it all began. That's when it all began. And then they didn't do this, and then this didn't happen, and then this happened. And that's how I am, and that's how I became who I am. And that's why I'm defended. That's the defense structure trying to create meaning around a story to validate itself. But again, the defense structure is only a thought system. It's only an idea of separation based in fear. So that defense structure was not created in time and form. The idea in separation came before form.
I'm sorry, you're saying that the idea of separation existed before form.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a little disorienting for me to hear, because, I mean, it almost seems like that can happen because of form. Like, what is there to disidentify with, and what illusion is there to have without the form, without duality? So maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, or?
Say more.
Well, I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah.
But so without form, there's that sacred reality, right?
Which is
Which is what we're talking about as the eternal. It sounds like.
good.
So just use the same term.
Sure.
So we have the eternal. So how could the defense structure exist without form?
How can the defense structure exist without form?
Right.
The belief in separation from the source of life.
Well, what's believing that without form if there's only the eternal? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, so,
And that's why maybe I'm misunderstanding.
no, this is really good. We're clarifying. That's why that's really good, so we can clarify.
Mhm.
So, this is just to say, what the terrain that we've just entered into it's not something that can get answered through words. In other words, what I can say about this will not satisfy anything, will not satisfy the answer. So the idea is I can say it, but then you go into your own internal listening and it's resolved or answered. So I'm just setting that up so that we can, so that everybody take a big deep breath. So now what we're talking about is what could be referred to as a creation myth. Yes, so it could be referred to as a creation myth. The only reason why this would have any value is to resolve the defense structure. If the idea of separation is believed in, because we are formless, because we are creator, we come from creation. If the idea is there, then the idea doesn't need to be a part of time or form. The idea is there. If I believe in that idea, whether that's in time or form or not, then I develop a defense structure that's based, all of a sudden, there's something out there that's other than me. What if it could hurt me? What if it doesn't like the fact that I'm separate from it? So this is all in the realm of the mind. It has nothing to do with time and form. It has to do with an internal experience. So can you feel the fear of that?
I'm confused what time is.
We could just say form.
Time is for?
We could just say it. If we're talking about like existence, talking about physical time, this moment.
So time is the distance between forms?
It could be, yeah.
Like, that's the perception of time?
What was that?
Space-time.
Space-time, yeah. So we're talking about, like we said, we'd be here at 1:30.
That's the kind of time you're talking about?
Yeah,
Oh,
time
okay.
and form, where like the sun is spinning and there's a universal clock, time through form. Form, yeah, unraveling in time. Yeah.
Another way of saying what you were saying about what you're believing in would be, which you told us on the Big Island workshop, which was, what voice are you listening to? Because there could be these ideas happening all the time, and then there can be the eternal and love that's always there. So it's a choice whether you want to listen to the love and allow love to be the guide or the teacher, or you want to listen to fear and allow that to be your guide.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So did that make any sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, what it seems to like really go into some like really fundamental ideas and like principles and
Yeah.
I got something really beautiful out of what you said. So yeah, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so the whole thing with time and form is that we can say that time and form, let's just say form to keep it simple. We can say that form is separate, that we're separate, but even our quantum physics has proven that's not happening. So that's just another projection within our mind. So we're working on the level of the mind. So I can be in time and form and feel separate, or I can be without time and form and be separate. So what we're looking at is how did separation get created? And it got created through the belief in it. And that doesn't necessarily happen in time and form. That can happen out of that. Yeah. So that's how we can keep reincarnating. If we were believing, if that was our experience, that's how we can keep the whole thing going. Is through the belief. And so that's, if you want to end the whole, reincarnation cycle and all these different things, then work on the level of the absolute. Work on the level of where your mind is believing in separation.
Cool. So then I just need to pose this, like, because it's pretty
Yeah.
fascinating to think about. So what we're saying is that there's a self that exists outside of time and form that can disidentify with the sacred reality. Because that, and so there can be a disharmonious self
Mhm.
that exists outside of time and form.
Yeah.
Which is pretty fascinating, because then that means that there is an absolute truth that isn't the sacred reality. Because where would,
Okay.
isn't that implied within
No,
that?
it's actually, this is where it gets really good.
Yeah.
Okay. That self is the defense structure.
Mm.
It's the idea.
Right, yeah. Wow.
So absolute reality never changes.
Mm-hmm.
It's always eternal love. But if I believe in the idea of separation, then I become
Yeah,
a false self.
that's a snake
Yeah.
itself, yeah.
So I become a false idea of myself. Meanwhile, the foundation of my eternal reality, who and what and where I really am, is waiting in the backdrop, no matter what. So if you want to resolve the defense structure, the best way to work with it is on the level of the mind, as opposed to based in time and form. You'll resolve it. But you can't resolve it by trying to resolve it. That's the whole thing, because as you're trying to resolve it, you're making it real. Yeah. So then the mind goes, well, then what the fuck do I do? Now what? And that's when you go, wait a minute. What if I just questioned all of this and listened to the flow of life? What if I understood? What if I just questioned that maybe this is true, that there actually is a mystery school, there is a flow of life, a biointelligence that's always here, a light and a truth that is always here, that knows exactly how to unravel this defense structure, this belief in separation. What if that intelligence is here? Can I allow it? Can I allow it? Well, what the hell would it mean if I allowed it? Well, focus on nourishment and find out. Yeah. You're giggling over there.
It's like a little monkey.
Is that resonating?
So the concentration on the nourishment is not strategic.
Exactly.
It's not about getting anywhere. Is that what you're saying? That in a certain sense, all practices tend to reinforce the sense of separation, because the reason to do them is because you feel separated.
Mm.
Or the motivation to have a practice.
Like if you didn't feel separated, you wouldn't.
Aha,
Do it.
now we're getting somewhere.
That's what I think you're going for.
That's why I wanted to lay this out. When you have a model where you acknowledge that you're whole and complete, you acknowledge that you're infinite, and there's nothing to fix, that all you're doing is stepping into a space in your life, a practice in your life that's focusing on that. It's just focusing on the nourishment. It's focusing on the experience of your abundance, the experience of your opulence. That's the model that I'm laying out. Let's just put away the focus of malnourishment, the focus of fear, the focus of resolving fear. Let's just not ignore it, but stop trying to fix that and acknowledge what we really are and what's always here. Let's just acknowledge it. Let's stop all of this stuff where we're getting over here and being real busy and root hogging over here and digging to China here and all these different things that we're trying to put meaning on, and just acknowledge we're whole. And then go, well, I'm not feeling that all the way. Okay, well, how can you? Rather than, well, why? Why? Let's just put that model away and see how we can start to, breath by breath, allow that nourishment. Does this resonate?
I
Yeah.
have a question that's quasi-specific. I feel like I have experiences of feeling out of touch with knowing in the moment what would nourish me.
Mm-hmm.
And that can sometimes look at like maybe overeating or craving sugar, or essentially I feel like points to an unpleasant experience that I'm experiencing that I'm trying to get out of.
Mhm.
And yet, you know, I have backgrounds in kind of supporting going into the pain. That's like one, I think, just side note on that. However, sometimes it's like, even if I wanted to focus on the nourishment, there's confusion as to what would be nourishing in that moment.
Yes, yeah. So that's what I feel is, that's why I feel that it's important to have a context and a container
Mhm.
where you can hold that confusion
Mhm.
and allow, it's like a womb
Mhm.
where whatever's inside of the womb is being exposed to all of this nourishment, whatever's needed. And it's that place of where you can feel yourself held by the womb to know that you don't have to come up with an answer. You just have to be present with what's there.
Mhm.
And as you're present, breath happens. And within that breath, there's a meeting of yourself that happens. So you can feel what's just the right amount of inhale, right for there, so you can feel met. And what's just the right of exhale, so that you can feel met. But you've got this love that's holding you and saying, it's okay. Just be with where this is. And in that, these little bits of nourishment you start having these tastes, and you go, that's working. That's feeding me.
Mhm.
It's not killing me. It's not toxic. It's not destroying me. It's actually giving me something that I can feel is validating the way I am. And so then from there, that micro dose of nourishment that we allow, that becomes a part of our experience. It becomes this moment where you're like, wait a minute, that worked. Maybe I could let go just a little bit more. Maybe something can clarify in that.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's how confusion gets resolved. It's by allowing yourself to be held in a container.
Seems like there's also a catch-22 a little bit to me, though, because it seems like within that confusion there needs to be some amount of presence still in order to
Absolutely.
acknowledge
Yeah.
the womb, to acknowledge being held, and to
Yeah.
acknowledge when and if micronourishment is being
Yeah.
received.
Absolutely. That's why the languaging of the practice, you create a container. You go, okay, I'm needing a practice. I'm needing a place where I can create a neutral place in my life where I can just go in and work with this. But I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm not going to try to change it. What I'm working with is allowing myself to feel loved and held. And then within that to remember that I am whole. So that's a practice. Yeah. So that practice is our life's work. It can be your life's work. And it can continue to unfold. But what I've seen that's happened in the New Age movement is that people have been so focused in a practice that was based in fixing and trying to, that they were getting more and more deprived. They were in the deprivation path.
Yeah, we're separate.
Yeah, and the confusion wasn't getting resolved. They were just getting more and more rigid and conflicted and dried out. And then, totally deprived and poverty and all these things. And it's like, that's not a spiritual practice. That's not how that works. And the biological intelligence will show you that. It just doesn't work that way. So that's why I keep drawing it back to this biological intelligence, because the model of the biological intelligence, you can question anything against it. And it will say to you, look, it won't stand up there.
If you have the ability, if you are tuned into listening to it,
Yeah.
which is another,
Yeah.
seems like you need practice, and
Yeah.
practice in order to cultivate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I am here, why I stepped forward, because I held that container for myself. I went through that process. I felt the eternal holding me. And then I realized this is what I need to share. This is what I have to share so that other people can enter into that process and enter into that practice. The beauty of that is that I am constantly feeling nourished and fed as I'm giving and sharing. So that's where we enter into the model of our gift. This is the gift I have to give. There's no expectations.
No.
You know.
So I don't know if this is sort of what you're getting at, but if we can read this experience for ourselves,
Yes.
say in a rhythm, like in the evenings, just to be practical about it, right?
Yeah.
So this is the time where I'm just gonna go in and go to absolute and have an experience, but then it sounds like you're talking about integrating it into moments during the day where you're like in the day
Yeah.
and you're not in a dive or
Yes.
anything like that. So is there the more you practice it, the more it just becomes integrated?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because if you have, did you have something?
Well, there's a term called organismic intelligence. I think it's like
Organismic.
somatic
Yeah.
experience work.
Yeah.
And it's like, it sounds like what you're saying is like as you begin to access deeper states, your organism develops an inherent intelligence that develops and unfolds in your life.
Yeah.
And yeah. So,
That's two words, one word for the same thing that we're talking about, biological intelligence, organismic intelligence, absolutely. And so it's where you're building the neurology and that's what's so beautiful about the classes and the workshops that we'll have, where we'll go in and we'll develop the neurology of staying grounded in the flow of life, and how it is that we can talk, and how it is that we can eat and drive our cars, all of these things from that connected flow, from that connected place. But what needs to happen first is the development of the focus on nourishment, the focus on the life flowing.
And would you say, because that's one of my biggest personal inquiries is focus, and sometimes seeing lack of focus. Would you say that comes from the grounding?
Absolutely.
Is that, would you say that's the foundation of the focus, is the grounding?
I think that there's another word I'm hearing behind what you're saying, which is consistency, continuity.
When you're saying continuity as like a interchangeable for the word I'm using it for focus?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. That's kind of what I'm hearing. It's like, so how do I sustain this? How do I, it's like that focus.
Yeah, I think that works.
That's where a structured practice becomes very helpful.
Yeah.
And so I always laugh here because it's like you're creating a structured practice for an unstructured process.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like the container.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's that place where you say, I need structure where I can learn how to focus.
Can I ask, this is another question, you mentioned building neurology. Is it your belief that we can like re-heal potential like neurologic damage or neurology that was never completely wired?
I can only speak from my experience,
Yeah.
and what I can tell you is that is my direct experience.
That you feel like you've been able to
Yeah,
rewire as well
absolutely.
as build maybe pathways that didn't even exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
actually scientifically.
yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
absolutely is.
The science is there,
Yeah.
yeah. In my direct experience, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just so you guys know, none of this is grounded in concept for me.
I'm
I know
almost
that.
more interested in someone speaking from their experience than a scientific study.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to hear a little bit about my story? Would that help as far as where it comes
If
from?
other people do, I'm
That'd be
kind of
great.
firing really
That'd be
personal
awesome.
questions